Welcome to Kern 9000's Horror House.
So here we have a film by Amicus Studios, which is based on the American horror comic of the 50s Tales from the Crypt. Well, to be precise, the stories in the film are based on tales from 3 different EC Comic horror comics: Tales from the Crypt, The Haunt of Fear, and The Vault of Horror. Just in case I haven't said it before, I love these portmanteau films, and I'm a huge fan of EC Comics. Most people will have seen the American Tales from the Crypt TV show, but I don't think that nowadays quite as many people will be familiar with this film, and that's a crying shame, as I think there's some real gold here. Okay, so what you have here is 5 stories with a bit of wraparound. 5 people come upon a catacomb and take a tour. After they get lost and become trapped in a room, just as they are wondering what to do, the Crypt Keeper appears and he begins to ask them why they are there. Each person talks to the Keeper, and we are presented with their story. It starts with a tale called And All Through the House. In this story, it's Christmas Eve, and Joanna Clayton, who is played by Joan Collins, kills her husband in order to get her hands on the payout from his life insurance. The most shocking part of this is that she does it with their young daughter in the house in her bed. But just as she's done the deed, there's an announcement on the radio that the police are seeking an escaped homicidal maniac posing as Santa Claus. When the man knocks on the door, the lady is met with a dilemma. Can she really call the police when the body of her husband is still on the floor? I don't want to spoil the film's story, so I'll leave it here, but I do find it really interesting that when they started making the American Tales from the Crypt series, one of the first episodes they made was based on this same story. It's interesting to watch both this film and the episode to see how the story is handled in both cases. The next story is Reflection of Death. A man called Carl Maitland leaves his wife and children to run off with his mistress and start a new life, but something happens during their journey. I can't really say much more without giving this one away, to be honest. It's an okay little story, but it's probably the most throwaway of all the tales in this movie, so I'll leave it there. Now the third story, Poetic Justice, is about a widowed janitor called Arthur Edward Grimsdyke, played by the amazing Peter Cushing. He's a kindly old man who gets his joy in life from making toys for the local children and looking after his dogs. Peter Cushing took this role because he'd recently lost his own wife and he felt he could relate to the character. He also apparently took a pay cut to do it. This gives the story and the character a real sense of sadness. You can feel his loss. Despite how good Arthur is, his heartless neighbour doesn't like him. He wants to try and force him to move, and so he starts a campaign of terror against him. He has the man's dogs removed, and then he spreads the rumour that Arthur's a paedophile, making the local mothers all pull their children away from him. There's something in this story which I think is so deeply real and saddening. It kind of speaks to the way that a lot of people are viewed now. We used to be a society that would let our kids wave to friendly elderly neighbours, but now we're all so scared that anyone could be a pervert that we'd rather anyone old or different just lock themselves behind their doors and quietly die. I especially don't want to ruin this story, as for me this is the highlight of the whole movie and I just think it needs to be seen. Even though it was made in the past, it speaks to the modern world now as we are. And, you know, Peter Cushing's no longer around, but the essence of the man survives in some of his great work like this. The fourth story, Wish You Were Here, is about a dirty businessman, Ralph Jason, who is in deep financial trouble. His lawyer and friend, Charles Gregory, tells him he must sell his real estate. When he tells his wife Enid, she recalls that they have a statue which has a legend attached to it. Apparently it will grant 3 wishes to its owner. The story is basically a retelling of the old classic story The Monkey's Paw. It's okay, but it's ultimately a very predictable story. It's done well enough, but it won't shock or surprise anyone. The last story, Blind Alleys, is about a cruel ex-military man called Major Rogers, who takes over the role of manager of the Elmridge Home for the Blind. And with the help of his dog Shane, he turns the home into a dystopian nightmare, slashing the living standards, leaving the blind cold and eating slop. And the story's about what the blind men do in response to this. I enjoy this story a lot and it's probably my second favourite, so again I'd sooner rather not spoil it. There's just something great though about the way the lead blind man talks. He's got this slow, haunting way about him. When I go, yes, Major Rogers. It's great. Overall, I think this film is a very enjoyable piece. The quality of the stories does vary, but none of them are hard to watch. I'd give the film a 7 out of 10. I would, however, very, very strongly recommend this movie, particularly to see Peter Cushing's role, as I think there's a lot that could be learned from this story, and there's just fantastic acting within it. Not only was he a brilliant actor, but he was just such a gentleman. And, you know, he's one of those people, if I could have a fantasy dinner party and invite anyone living or dead, he'd be head of the table. Anyway, it's Kerr9000 saying, good night, boys and ghouls. Keep on screaming.